The sun hadn't yet climbed over the rolling hills of Willow Creek, a quiet farming town in rural Ohio, when the scream tore through the morning air. It was sharp, raw, and unmistakably furious, slicing through the hum of crickets and the distant crow of roosters. On Maple Lane, where clapboard houses sat neatly spaced amid cornfields and wildflower patches, every neighbor knew that scream belonged to Karen Whitaker. She stood on her pristine lawn, hands on hips, her floral cardigan flapping in the breeze, glaring at the mailbox across the street. My mailbox. The numbers 127 were crooked, slapped on haphazardly with cheap stickers, a mockery of the orderly brass digits that had been there yesterday. Karen's face was a storm cloud, her voice booming as she pointed a trembling finger at me. Emma Carter, standing frozen on my porch. You think you can just ignore the HOA? Emma. Those numbers are a disgrace. I blinked, coffee mug burning my hand, trying to process the scene. The whole street was watching now old Mr. Jenkins peering from his rocking chair, the Larson kids pausing their bikes. Even the stray tabby cat seemed to sense the tension. Karen had been the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek's HOA for years, her rulebook thicker than the Bible and twice as sacred. But this was new. She crossed the street, ripped off my mailbox numbers, and replaced them with her own tacky stickers, all because they didn't match her aesthetic standards. I felt my pulse spike, anger bubbling up like a kettle left too long on the stove. Karen, you can't just change my address, I shouted back, stepping onto the grass. Her eyes narrowed, a smirk curling her lips. Oh, honey, I already did. What Karen didn't know, what none of us knew, was that tampering with a mailbox is a federal offense. And in a town like Willow Creek, where secrets fester like weeds in a neglected field, this small act was about to unravel everything. I stormed across the street, my bare feet cold against the dew-soaked grass, my voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and rage. You had no right, Karen. That's my property. She didn't flinch, her chin tilting up as if she were a general addressing a disobedient soldier. Emma, the HOA exists to maintain standards. Your mailbox was an eyesore. I fixed it. You're welcome. Her tone dripped with condescension, and I felt my hands clench into fists. The mailbox wasn't just a box, it was my grandfather's, hand-painted with his initials, a relic from the farm he'd worked his whole life to keep. Karen's fix was a slap in the face, a violation dressed up as neighborly duty. By noon, the street was buzzing. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting at the community barn, a weathered red structure where we usually held potlucks and 4-H meetings. I showed up, still fuming, the weight of every neighbor's stare pressing into me. Karen stood at the front, her clipboard a scepter, rattling off rules about curb appeal and community pride. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. Karen, you broke the law. You tampered with my mailbox, and I'm reporting it. The room went silent. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she laughed a sharp, dismissive sound. Report me. For helping you. Good luck, Emma. I didn't know much about federal law, but I knew enough to call the post office. The clerk, a gruff man named Hank who'd known my family for decades, listened quietly as I explained. His voice dropped low. Emma, that's serious. Mailbox tampering's a federal offense. You sure you want to push this? I hesitated, my anger cooling just enough to let doubt creep in. Karen was a pain, but she was a neighbor. We'd all grown up here, our lives tangled like the roots of the old oak by the creek. Still, something in me snapped. She'd gone too far. Yes, I said. I'm sure. The next morning, a postal inspector named Clara arrived in a nondescript sedan. She was all business, her clipboard dwarfing Karen's, her questions sharp and precise. She examined my mailbox, took photos of the crooked stickers, and asked for my old brass numbers, which I'd found discarded in Karen's trash. Clara's face was unreadable, but her tone was firm. "This is a felony, Ms. Carter. If you press charges, it's out of our hands." I swallowed hard, glancing at Karen's house, where her curtains twitched. She was watching. I nodded. "Do it." Word spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. By evening, the town was split, half calling me a troublemaker, half cheering me on. Karen, oblivious to the storm brewing, doubled down. She posted flyers on every lamppost, accusing me of defacing community property and undermining HOA values. I found one taped to my front door, the words "selfish" and "disgrace" circled in red marker. My stomach churned, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. The tension wasn't just about the mailbox anymore. It was about power, about who got to decide what mattered in our little corner of the world. Karen had ruled Willow Creek with an iron fist for years, fining people for unmowed lawns, dictating paint colors, even scolding kids for chalk drawings on sidewalks. I'd always stayed quiet, like most folks, but this was personal. She'd crossed a line, and I was done playing nice. As the days passed, I started digging. Karen wasn't just a control freak, she had secrets. Old Mr. Jenkins let slip that she'd been skimming HOA dues for years, funneling them into community projects that never materialized. The Larsons whispered about her husband, Tom, who'd left town abruptly last spring, rumors of an affair trailing him like exhaust. And then there was the land deal, shady agreement Karen had pushed through to sell part of the town's communal pasture to a developer. I wasn't the only one fed up. I was just the first to fight back. The postal inspector's investigation moved fast. Clara called me a week later. Her voice clipped. "We've got enough to charge her. Tampering with mail is a federal offense. Carries up to 7 years. You'll need to testify." My heart sank. Testify? In court. Against Karen, who'd baked cookies for my daughter's school fundraiser last year. I thought of my grandfather's mailbox, his initials now scratched and faded, and my resolve hardened. "I'll do it," I said. The night before the hearing, couldn't sleep. Willow Creek felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. Neighbors stopped talking to me, their whispers sharp as knives. Karen's flyers had done their work, painting me as the villain. But I wasn't alone. A few folks, Mr. Jenkins, the Larsons, even Hank from the post office, started sharing their own stories of Karen's overreach. We met quietly in my kitchen, sipping coffee, plotting. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking back our town. The hearing was set for a crisp October morning at the county courthouse, a brick building an hour's drive from Willow Creek. I arrived early, my palms sweaty, clutching a folder with photos of my mailbox and Clara's report. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, its high ceilings amplifying every whisper. Karen sat across the aisle, her lawyer whispering in her ear, her face a mask of calm defiance. But I saw her hands tremble as she adjusted her cardigan. She wasn't as untouchable as she thought. Clara took the stand first, laying out the evidence with surgical precision. She held up the discarded brass numbers, my grandfather's initials glinting under the courtroom lights. "These were removed without permission," she said, her voice steady. "The defendant replaced them with unauthorized stickers, violating federal postal regulations." The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled tight, nodded slowly, her pen scratching notes. I felt a spark of hope. But Karen's lawyer was quick to counter. He painted her as a well-meaning neighbor, beautifying the community, while I was the hothead blowing things out of proportion. "It's just a mailbox," he said, chuckling. The judge didn't smile. When it was my turn to testify, my knees shook as I walked to the stand. The room felt too big, the eyes of strangers and neighbors boring into me. I told the story how I'd found the stickers, how Karen had laughed it off, how the mailbox wasn't just metal but a piece of my family's history. My voice cracked when I mentioned my grandfather, and I saw a flicker of something guilt, maybe in Karen's eyes. But it was gone as fast as it came. Her lawyer grilled me, twisting my words, asking why I hadn't just talked it out with her. I wanted to scream that I'd tried, that Karen didn't listen, but I kept my cool. "She broke the law," I said simply. "That's why we're here." The truth started to unravel in the days that followed. The hearing wasn't just about the mailbox. Anna Maria had cracked open a door to Karen's whole operation. Clara's investigation had uncovered more than just my case. Other neighbors came forward, their own complaints piling up like kindling. Mrs. Larson testified about a certified letter she'd never received. Misdelivered because Karen had reorganized her mailbox too. Hank from the post office revealed a pattern. Karen had been swapping numbers on multiple mailboxes, claiming it was for uniformity. But it had caused chaos with mail delivery. The judge's face grew darker with each testimony. Back in Willow Creek, the town was a pressure cooker. Karen's flyers stopped appearing, but her influence lingered. Some neighbors shunned me, calling me a snitch, while others slipped me notes of support, too scared to speak publicly. I started noticing things: Karen's car parked late at the developer's office, hushed phone calls when she thought no one was listening. I wasn't a detective, but I had a hunch. With Mr. Jenkins' help, I dug through public records at the county library. What I found made my stomach drop. Karen had been funneling HOA dues into a private account tied to the land deal. She wasn't just a control freak, she was a crook. I shared the evidence with Clara, who passed it to the authorities. The postal case was one thing, but this was bigger. Embezzlement. Fraud. The kind of scandal that could tear a small town apart. I didn't want to destroy Karen. Not really. But I couldn't let her keep hurting people. The night I handed over the documents, I sat on my porch, staring at the mailbox. The stickers were gone now, replaced with new brass numbers I'd bought myself. But the weight of what was coming felt heavier than ever. The next court date was electric. Karen's lawyer tried to pivot, claiming the mailbox issue was a misunderstanding. But the judge wasn't buying it. When Clara presented the financial records, the room gasped. Karen's face went white, her composure cracking like thin ice. She stood, shouting, "This is a witch hunt. Emma's out to ruin me." The judge banged her gavel, and Karen sank back into her seat, her hands covering her face. For the first time, she looked small, not the towering figure who'd ruled Willow Creek. That night, I drove home under a sky bruised with storm clouds. The town felt different, quiet, but not peaceful. Neighbors whispered about Karen's downfall, some with glee, others with pity. I wanted to feel triumphant, but all I felt was tired. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about trust, about the invisible lines that hold a community together. Karen had broken those lines, but I wondered if I had too, by pushing so hard. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No signature, just a scrawled message. "You did the right thing." I recognized the handwriting, Mrs. Larson. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. I wasn't fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Willow Creek, for the people who'd been silenced too long. The air in Willow Creek grew heavier as the trial loomed closer. The courthouse became a stage, and the town was its reluctant audience. Karen's arrest for mailbox tampering had been shocking enough, but the embezzlement charges turned whispers into shouts. People who'd once nodded along at HOA meetings now swapped stories of her overreach fines for trivial infractions, threats to foreclose on homes for unpaid dues, even rumors she'd bullied the town council into approving her land deal. The truth was spilling out, and it was messier than anyone expected. I wasn't prepared for the spotlight. Reporters from the county paper showed up, snapping photos of my mailbox like it was a crime scene. A headline screamed, "HOA tyrant faces federal charges," with Karen's name in bold. My name was there too, smaller but impossible to miss. I'd wanted justice, not fame, but in a town of 2,000. Privacy was a luxury I no longer had. Kids at my daughter Lily's school whispered about that mailbox lady, and she came home crying, asking why everyone hated us. I hugged her tight, promising it would pass, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Karen, meanwhile, wasn't going quietly. She hired a new lawyer, a slick city type named Gordon who wore suits too sharp for Willow Creek. He spun a story of Karen as a victim, a well-meaning woman targeted by a vindictive neighbor. At a pretrial hearing, he produced letters from HOA loyalists, praising Karen's community spirit. One even called her a pillar of Willow Creek. I sat in the back, my jaw tight, as Gordon painted me as a troublemaker with a grudge. The judge didn't seem swayed, but the doubt in the room was palpable. Had I gone too far? The confrontation came sooner than I expected. After the hearing, Karen cornered me in the courthouse parking lot. The sky was gray, the air thick with the promise of rain. She looked different, her hair less perfect, her eyes red-rimmed. "You're tearing this town apart, Emma," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're a hero. You're a nobody who got lucky." I froze, her words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. But then I remembered my grandfather's mailbox, the HOA fines that had drained my savings, the neighbors too scared to speak up. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "You did this to yourself, Karen. Not me." She flinched, but only for a moment. Then she leaned in, her breath hot on my face. "You'll regret this. I know things about you, Emma. About your family." My heart stuttered. What did she mean? My parents were gone. My grandfather too. Lily was all I had left. Was she bluffing? Or did she have something real? I drove home, her words looping in my mind, the cornfields blurring past my window. Willow Creek had always felt safe, but now it was a maze of secrets. Back home, I rallied my allies. Mr. Jenkins, with his decades of town gossip, confirmed Karen's land deal was shadier than I'd thought. The developer, a company called Green Vista, had ties to her brother-in-law, who'd mysteriously left town with her husband. The Larsons dug up old HOA records, showing thousands in miscellaneous expenses that never added up. Hank from the post office even found a log of misdelivered mail, all linked to Karen's reorganization. We met in my kitchen, papers spread across the table, piecing together a case that felt bigger than any of us. The trial's opening day was chaos. The courtroom overflowed with townsfolk, some clutching signs that read "Justice for Karen." Others, quieter, sat on my side, their nods giving me strength. Clara presented the federal case first, the mailbox tampering, backed by photos, witness statements, and postal regulations. Karen's lawyer countered with charm, calling it a minor mistake blown out of proportion. But when the embezzlement charges came up, the room shifted. A forensic accountant testified, tracing HOA funds to an offshore account in Karen's name. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face stayed blank, but her hands gripped the table so hard her knuckles were white. I testified again, this time about the bigger picture, how Karen's control had suffocated Willow Creek. I talked about the fines, the threats, the land deal that would have turned our pasture into condos. My voice shook, but I kept going, fueled by the faces of my neighbors, some nodding, others glaring. When I stepped down, Mr. Jenkins squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing right, Emma," he whispered. I wanted to believe him, but Karen's threat lingered. What did she know? That night, a brick crashed through my living room window. Glass shattered across the rug, and Lily screamed from her bedroom. I ran to her, heart pounding, checking every lock. A note was taped to the brick. "Back off." No signature, but I knew. I called the sheriff, a tired man named Roy who'd known my family forever. He took the note, promising to look into it, but his eyes said what we both knew. Karen still had friends in high places. I barely slept, holding Lily close, wondering if I'd pushed too far. The brick was a turning point. Willow Creek wasn't just divided, it was at war. Karen's supporters rallied, plastering the town with flyers calling for my family to leave. "Troublemakers don't belong here," one read, taped to the gas station pump. But others were waking up. The Larsons organized a town meeting at the community barn, bypassing the HOA entirely. Over 100 people showed up, more than I'd ever seen at a potluck. Mr. Jenkins stood, his voice shaky but clear, recounting years of Karen's bullying. Mrs. Larson shared bank statements, proof of the missing dues. Even shy little Timmy Larson spoke, trembling, about how Karen had fined his family for a basketball hoop, forcing them to sell their car to pay it. I stood last, my throat tight. I told them about the brick, the note, the fear in Lily's eyes. "This isn't about a mailbox," I said. "It's about our home, our town. We deserve better." The room erupted in applause, but not everyone clapped. Karen's allies sat stone-faced, their loyalty unshaken. I realized then that this wasn't just about evidence or law, it was about hearts. And Karen still held too many. The trial's second week was brutal. Gordon, Karen's lawyer, went on the attack. He dug into my past, dragging up a decade-old speeding ticket, a late property tax payment, even a rumor about my grandfather's farm debts. Ms. Carter has a history of disregarding rules, he said, smirking. I wanted to scream that none of it mattered, that Karen was the criminal, but the judge's stern gaze kept me quiet. Clara countered with more evidence, emails between Karen and Green Vista, promising her a cut of the land deal profits. The accountant returned, showing how Karen had siphoned $50,000 over 5 years. The numbers were staggering for a town like ours. Karen took the stand, and I braced myself. She was a performer, tears welling as she spoke of her love for Willow Creek, how she'd only wanted to protect our values. She admitted to changing my mailbox numbers but called it a silly mistake, not a crime. The embezzlement, a misunderstanding, she said, blaming her accountant. Her voice was soft, her eyes pleading, and I saw some jurors lean forward, swayed. I felt sick. She was slipping away. That night, I found another clue. Lily, bless her, had overheard Karen at the grocery store, whispering to a friend about papers in the barn. I didn't know what it meant, but I trusted my gut. With Mr. Jenkins and Mrs. Larson, we snuck into the community barn after dark, flashlights cutting through the shadows. Behind a stack of old folding chairs, we found a locked filing cabinet. Mr. Jenkins, who'd once been a locksmith, had it open in 10 minutes. Inside were documents, contracts with Green Vista, bank transfers, even a letter from Karen's husband, admitting he'd left to avoid her schemes. It was a gold mine. We handed the papers to Clara, who looked like she'd won the lottery. The next day, she presented them in court. Gordon objected, calling it unauthorized evidence. But the judge allowed it. The documents painted a clear picture. Karen hadn't just tampered with mailboxes, she'd been orchestrating a takeover of Willow Creek's land, planning to profit while we lost our heritage. The jury's faces hardened. Karen's tears didn't work this time. But the victory felt hollow. The brick through my window wasn't the last threat. My tires were slashed 2 days later, and someone spray-painted "snitch" on my garage. Lily stopped sleeping, jumping at every noise. I started doubting myself. Was this worth it? I'd wanted justice, but at what cost? My neighbors were splitsome, brought casseroles. Others crossed the street to avoid me. Willow Creek was fracturing, and I was at the center. Clara pulled me aside after court one day. "Emma, this is bigger than you now. The feds are looking at Green Vista, too. You've stirred up a hornet's nest." I nodded, but my heart sank. I hadn't meant to start a war. I just wanted my mailbox back, my town back. That night, I sat with Lily, promising her we'd be okay. She looked at me, her eyes too old for an 8-year-old. "Why do people hate us, Mom?" I didn't have an answer. The trial's final days loomed, and I felt the weight of every choice. Karen's empire was crumbling, but so was the peace I'd taken for granted. I wondered if Willow Creek could ever heal, or if we'd all pay the price for one woman's greed. The trial's closing arguments were a battlefield. Gordon, Karen's lawyer, leaned hard into her image as a devoted neighbor, framing her as a woman misunderstood, her minor errors blown out of proportion by a vengeful town. He pointed at me, his voice smooth as oil. "MS. Carter's personal vendetta has torn Willow Creek apart. Is this justice?" My stomach twisted, but I kept my eyes on the jury. They were tired, their faces lined with the weight of deciding a neighbor's fate. Clara, for the prosecution, was relentless. She laid out the evidence like a map: mailbox tampering, embezzlement, the land deal. "This isn't about one mailbox," she said. "It's about a pattern of control, greed, and betrayal." The jury nodded, some visibly angry. I held my breath. The verdict came faster than expected. On a chilly November morning, the foreman stood, his voice steady. "We find the defendant, Karen Whitaker, guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted gasps, cheers, a few sobs. Karen's face crumpled, her hands gripping the table as if it could anchor her. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in federal prison for the postal violations and embezzlement, with restitution to the HOA. As deputies led her away, she looked back at me, her eyes burning with something I couldn't read: hate, regret, or both. Willow Creek didn't celebrate. The town felt like a house after a storm, standing, but battered. Karen's allies went quiet, their signs disappearing from lawns. But the damage was done. My garage still bore the word "snitch" in red paint, and Lily refused to play outside, scared of shadows. I tried to rebuild, organizing a new HOA with Mr. Jenkins and the Larsons. One focused on fairness, not control. We held meetings in the barn, open to everyone. No clipboards required. Slowly, people came tentative at first, then eager, sharing ideas for the town we'd almost lost. But Karen's threat lingered in my mind. I know things about your family. I couldn't shake it. Late one night, I went through my grandfather's old papers, stored in a dusty trunk in the attic. Most were farm records, yellowed and brittle, but one letter stopped me cold. It was from a lawyer, dated 10 years ago, mentioning a land dispute my grandfather had claimed part of the communal pasture, the same one Karen wanted to sell. The case had been dropped, but the letter hinted at bad blood between him and Karen's father, a former town councilman. Had she known? Was this why she'd targeted me? I showed the letter to Mr. Jenkins, who sighed. Old grudges die hard in Willow Creek, he said. He remembered the dispute Karen's father had lost influence because of it. A blow to their family's pride. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make sense of her venom. She hadn't just been after control, she'd been settling a score. The realization didn't make me feel better. It just made me sad. How many feuds had shaped our town, festering beneath the surface. I decided to let it go. The letter went back in the trunk, and I focused on the future. Lily started smiling again, drawing chalk flowers on our driveway. The Larsons hosted a barbecue, and for the first time in months, neighbors laughed together, their kids playing in the pasture we'd saved. The new HOA voted to restore the barn, turning it into a true community space. We even planted a garden by the creek, naming it after my grandfather. His mailbox stood proud again, its brass numbers gleaming. But healing wasn't easy. Some neighbors never forgave me, their glares a reminder of the cost. I wondered if I'd done the right thing, dragging our dirty laundry into the open. Then, one evening, Mrs. Larson pulled me aside. You gave us our town back, she said, her eyes misty. We were scared for too long. Her words settled into me, easing the ache. I hadn't just fought for myself, I'd fought for all of us. The land deal collapsed without Karen's push, and Green Vista pulled out. The pasture stayed ours, a green heart in the center of Willow Creek. I walked there sometimes, Lily skipping beside me, and felt the weight lift, just a little. The town wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. Winter settled over Willow Creek, blanketing the fields in snow and quieting the town's wounds. The trial was over, but its echoes lingered. Karen's house sat dark, her belongings packed into a moving truck that left one frosty morning. No one knew where she'd gone after her sentencing, some said to her sisters in Cleveland. Others whispered about a halfway house. I didn't care to know. I just wanted to move on. But moving on in a small town is like trying to outrun your own shadow. Lily was my anchor. She'd started school again, her laughter returning as she played with the Larson kids. I watched her from the porch, my coffee steaming in the cold, and felt a flicker of hope. The new HOA was working slowly, messily, but working. We'd slashed the rulebook to a single page, focusing on community, not control. No more fines for unmowed lawns or unapproved paint colors. We even started a fund to help families struggling with dues, named after Mr. Jenkins' late wife. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Still, the scars remained. The snitch graffiti on my garage had faded, but I could still see it in certain light. Some neighbors warmed to me. Hank brought me a pie from his wife, and the Larsons invited us for Christmas dinner, but others kept their distance. Old Mrs. Tate, a Karen loyalist, crossed the street when she saw me. Her lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. I tried not to let it sting, but it did. I'd fought for Willow Creek, but not everyone saw it that way. One morning, a letter arrived from the county. It was about the pasture, confirming it was safe from development, thanks to our efforts. I read it twice, then tucked it away with my grandfather's papers. That land had been his dream, a place for the town to gather, to remember who we were. Karen had almost taken it, just like she'd taken his mailbox. I wondered if she'd ever understood what she'd done, or if she'd just seen it as a game to win. The community barn became our lifeline. We held movie nights there, the kids giggling under blankets as old westerns flickered on a borrowed projector. We hosted potlucks, the tables groaning with casseroles and homemade pies. Slowly, the town started to knit itself back together. But I couldn't shake Karen's last words to me in the parking lot. "I know things about your family." They gnawed at me, especially on quiet nights when the wind howled through the cornfields. I decided to dig deeper, not for revenge, but for closure. I called Clara, who'd become a friend through the trial. She was blunt, as always. "Karen's done, Emma. But if you want to know more, check the town archives. Old council records might have something." So I did. The library's basement was a maze of dusty files. But I found a 1970s council meeting transcript where my grandfather and Karen's father clashed over the pasture. Her father had wanted to sell it even then, and my grandfather had rallied the town to stop him. The fight had been bitter, splitting families. Karen, just a teenager then, must have grown up with that grudge. It explained her fixation, but it didn't make it right. I closed the file, my hands dusty, and felt a weight lift. The past wasn't mine to carry. I had Lily, our home, our town. That was enough. I left the library and drove to the pasture, where the new garden was taking shape, even under snow. A wooden sign stood at the entrance, carved with my grandfather's name. I traced the letters, my fingers cold, and whispered, "We did it." The town meeting that spring was different. No clipboards, no lectures, just neighbors, talking about what we wanted Willow Creek to be. Someone suggested a summer fair, another a free library in the barn. I listened, my heart full, as Lily ran around with her friends, her laughter louder than the pain of the past year. We were healing, one step at a time. But I knew it wasn't over. Small towns hold grudges, and Karen's shadow would linger. I'd heard rumors she was appealing her sentence, claiming new evidence. I didn't know if it was true, but I was ready. Willow Creek had faced worse than one woman's greed. We'd face it again, together. Spring brought new life to Willow Creek. The pasture bloomed with wildflowers, and the garden we'd planted thrived. Its rows of vegetables a testament to what we could do when we worked together. The barn hummed with activity craft fairs, book clubs, even a kids' theater group that Lily joined, her shy smile lighting up the stage. I started to believe we could leave the trial behind, that Willow Creek could be more than its scars. But Karen wasn't done. A letter arrived in April, forwarded from her lawyer. She was out on bail, pending an appeal, and wanted to meet to clear the air. My first instinct was to burn it, but curiosity won. I agreed to meet her at a diner in the next town, neutral ground. The diner was all chrome and grease, the kind of place where farmers lingered over coffee. Karen sat in a corner booth, her cardigan replaced with a plain sweater, her hair limp. She looked smaller, but her eyes still had that sharp edge. "Emma," she started, her voice soft but calculated. "I'm sorry about the mailbox. I didn't know. I didn't buy it, but I let her talk." She spun a story about stress, about feeling responsible for the town, about her husband's betrayal pushing her to extremes. She didn't mention the embezzlement or the land deal, and I didn't push. I just listened, sipping my coffee, waiting for the real reason she'd called me. Came at the end. "I'm not the villain here," she said, leaning forward. "You dug into my life, Emma. I could dig into yours. There it was, the threat again. I kept my face neutral, though my heart raced. Karen, the trial's over. You lost. Let it go. She smiled, thin and cold. It's not over until I say it is. I left the diner, my hands shaking, and called Clara. She wasn't surprised. She's grasping at straws. Emma. The appeal's a long shot. Stay vigilant, but don't let her scare you. I tried to focus on the good. The summer fair was a hit, the pasture filled with laughter, music, and the smell of grilled corn. Lily won a ribbon for her zucchini bread, and I felt a pride so fierce it hurt. But Karen's words haunted me. I started locking the doors at night, checking the windows. Lily noticed, her questions sharp for a kid her age. Is she coming back, Mom? I lied, saying no, but I wasn't sure. The appeal hearing was set for June. Clara warned me it was mostly procedure. Karen's lawyer was arguing insufficient evidence. But the documents from the barn were airtight. Still, I went, needing to see it through. The courtroom was quieter this time. Fewer neighbors. Less drama. Karen looked tired. Her lawyer's arguments weaker. The judge dismissed the appeal in under an hour. Karen didn't look at me as she left. Her shoulders slumped. For the first time, I felt a pang of pity. She'd lost everything: her home, her power, her place in Willow Creek. Back home, the town was moving forward. We voted in a new town council, one that promised transparency. The HOA fund grew, helping families fix roofs and pay bills. The barn became a symbol of what we could be: not perfect, but honest. I started teaching a gardening class there, showing kids like Lily how to plant seeds, how to nurture something fragile into something strong. One evening, Mr. Jenkins stopped by with a gift: a new brass plaque for my mailbox, engraved with my grandfather's initials. He'd be proud of you, he said, his eyes crinkling. I hugged him, tears stinging. That night, I sat on the porch with Lily, the plaque gleaming in the moonlight. We talked about her dreams, about the town, about the future. The scars were still there, but they were fading, like the graffiti on my garage. Willow Creek wasn't the same. It was better. Not because Karen was gone, but because we'd found our voice. We'd learned to fight, not just for ourselves, but for each other. And that, I realized, was worth everything. By fall, Willow Creek felt like home again. The pasture was a riot of color, its garden bursting with pumpkins and late-blooming sunflowers. The barn hosted a harvest festival, the air thick with cider and laughter. Lily ran through the crowd, her face painted like a cat, her giggles chasing away the last of my fears. The town had changed, not just in rules or faces, but in spirit. We were neighbors again, not enemies. I still thought about Karen sometimes. Word was she'd moved to a city apartment, far from Willow Creek's fields and feuds. I didn't hate her, not anymore. She'd been a storm, but storms pass, and we'd rebuilt stronger. The new HOA was thriving, its meetings more like family gatherings than tribunals. We even started a scholarship fund for local kids, named after the pasture itself. Lily wanted to be the first to apply, dreaming of studying botany someday. One crisp morning, I found a package on my porch. No note, just a small box with a new set of mailbox numbers, brass, polished, identical to my grandfather's. I didn't know who sent them, but I had a guess. Mrs. Larson smiled when I asked, her eyes twinkling. Some folks know how to say sorry without words, she said. I installed the numbers that afternoon, Lily helping me, her hands steady on the screwdriver. The mailbox looked right again, like it belonged. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. Clara called, her voice lighter than usual. The feds shut down Green Vista, she said. Your evidence helped. They were scamming towns all over Ohio. I sat down, stunned. Our little fight had rippled further than I'd imagined. Willow Creek wasn't just savage, it was a warning to others. Don't underestimate a small town. Don't underestimate us. That night, I walked to the pasture alone. The stars were bright, the air cool. I sat by the garden, my grandfather's sign glowing faintly in the moonlight. I thought about the trial, the brick, the threats. I thought about Karen's fall, and my own doubts. But mostly, I thought about Willow Creek, its stubborn heart. Its messy, beautiful people. We'd been broken, but we'd healed. Not perfectly, but enough. I realized then what the fight had been about. Not just a mailbox, or even a town. It was about standing up, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. It was about saying, this is ours, and we'll protect it. I'd started it for myself, for my grandfather's memory, but I'd finished it for Lily, for the Larsons, for Mr. Jenkins, for every neighbor who'd felt small under Karen's shadow. We weren't small anymore. As I walked home, the lights of Willow Creek glowed against the dark. Each house a story, each life a thread in the tapestry we'd woven together. I didn't know what the future held. Grudges might linger. New storms might come, but I knew we'd face them together. And that was enough.